Hey, morning, how you morning? How are you? Welcome to another program of Guyanese Morning Time. Can you hear me clearly? Can you hear me loudly and clearly? Is there an echo in your audio? Let me know, please, and thank you. I'm waiting for that thumbs up or that thumbs down. Y'all talk to me quickly. Hello? Can you hear me? Nobody is responding. What's going on? Loud and clear. Thank you. Good. So it's budget day. I didn't even know the date. Anyways, welcome to another program. As promised, this morning we're going to have Mr. Jordan on. I did see that Mr. Jordan was going to come and give us a pre-budget presentation. And so we are preparing for that while keeping small days in our mind. You know, small days, we used to say budget day, big jet landing. And so today, the big jet is expected to land. I don't know how favorable it is going to be for you folks, but the reality is it is budget day today, and the 12 disciples are going to be in parliament, and there's supposed to be the meeting of the non-governmental members of the National Assembly at 10 o'clock. And that meeting is intended to allow for the election of the leader of the opposition, presumptively Azuddin Mohammed. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. I know the government has been making all kinds of efforts to influence the vote. I don't know if they have succeeded, like when they were able to influence the no confidence vote on the coalition government back in the time of Granger. I don't know if anybody is prepared to take lots of cab trip to Canada again. And so will I would say vote against the interest of Win and Azudin Mohammed. I know the APNU has already indicated that they're not going to be nominating a candidate, and so they're not going to be contesting for the position of leader of the opposition. I don't know if that will change by the time they get there at 10 o'clock today. Good. But lots of things to be discussed, I'm sure. We really lost out last week. We haven't had the opportunity to talk about a lot of things like the sexual exploitation of the police force and stuff like that. I am particularly concerned and would like to discuss that sexual exploitation issue because I noticed something that has been happening for quite a while. And people generally look at things differently to me. They usually have different points of view. I'd like to discuss that issue in terms of the role of Black men in our society, right? The role of Black men in our society. What do our quote unquote brothers and even sisters in the Guyana police force, I'm talking about Black people here, see their roles as when it comes to Black people's children being recruited in the police force? So hopefully in the course of the week, we're going to get to talk about that. I'm still using a temporary measure to broadcast because I'm waiting on feedback for the broadcast laptop. I'm waiting on feedback from technicians of it. And so I'm waiting to hear from them in terms of whether or not it can be serviced or whether or not I simply have to go procure another. I'm praying to God that it can be serviced because, like I said, it's a rather expensive piece of equipment because of the specs that are required. Um, and nobody likes to spend that money twice in a lifetime. Anyway, let me call Mr. Jordan so we can have his input in the budget discourse. Um, yeah, sometimes I'm fumbling because I am in unfamiliar territory and I have to get myself acclimatized to what's happening here. What is this now? I swear the devil is out to get me. I swear the devil is out to get me. Kindly confirm that you're still getting your audio and everything is still clear. Mr. Jordan, good morning to you. Yeah?
I say, I hope your equipment is not like the weather.
Why I hope not. Hmm.
You sound
So
a
what
bit
kind of how you
distant.
do? Are you hearing me clearly?
Okay. All right. Well, I'm happy that we can have a program this morning. Like you, I was a bit disappointed that we weren't able to get our regular Thursday schedule going, but that's life, you know. The best things in life sometimes go awry. And last week, Thursday, obviously, was one of those times. But happily, we are on today for what we are calling the budget special. And I hope people have been adequately informed and are tuned in, or they can spread the word that we have budget special on today, and become and be part of that discussion. But before we get into the the discussion per se, I just want to note two quick things. And even before then, I just want to say condolences to the family and so on of Donald Sinclair, because I could have said it last week. But you know, Donald Sinclair was part of a well-known family of Sinclairs, including Joyce Sinclair, who was well-known doyen of permanent secretaries, and another brother, Noel Sinclair, who was, I believe, permanent representative to the United Nations and distinguished himself in that post. There was also, I think, Noelle Sinclair, who lesser known but equally important in terms of the um, siblings, who worked at Bank Guyana. I don't know, doubt whether she's still there, but yes, she worked at Bank Guyana. I understand there are even more siblings in the United States. But he was a well-known guy. He was married to a good friend of mine, Karen Blackmon, who now lives in New Jersey. And he wore many hats. At one time, I think he taught English and English literature at um, North Georgetown, I think, which was his alma mater. He was very good at volleyball, played volleyball with the likes of Basil Williams and Lemmy Shuffler and so on. He was into bodybuilding. He had his own fitness gym. I think it's Paradise something it was named. He had his own fitness gym. He was a lecturer at UG in tourism and so on. He was the director of the Tourism Association, I think, but definitely he was director of the Guyana Tourism Authority and so on. So he wore many hats, and he was well known. Um, uh, people are people that you know, and especially the ones you know well, are just falling like flies. 2026 has not been kind so far. A number of people have already opted out, but that is life, cycle of life: born, live, and then die. Yeah. One of the two issues I want to reference before we get into our body special is that late last week I saw Mr. Ejil, the Public Works Minister, on an exercise to remove movable, derelict, and other uh, vehicles on a site there at the railway, um, close to Sunny Bap Street. Now I know that whole area, as I kept saying on this program. I grew up in Station Street, Kitty, and all that little area there was train line and grass and so on. But when I knew it, so I know the area he's talking about. And apparently, the PPP government um, would have concreted a patch there for recreational purposes. I don't know. They don't ever consult the community as to whether they want a recreational space, and that if they want a recreational space, whether they want it there or so on. But they go and put it there. In the event, I believe it wasn't being used, or certainly not being used in the manner intended. There's another recreational space they started building right there near to the Campbell Government School, and I don't know what has happened. If no one occupies that area, another colossal waste of money, as indeed as the waste of money on the railway embankment along Lamaha Street, because that is now an extended car park instead of a place where, as they intended, people will go and sit and I don't know, watch the cars go by or something. But anyhow, because of its lack of use by the residents and so on, people start parking there, old derelict vehicles, surfaceable vehicles, movable vehicles, and so on. And so he took it upon himself to carry a camera there and show that he was giving people 1 hour and to remove the vehicles and so. Okay, I think quite frankly he was doing a decent job, except that I think as a minister, I don't think that was his role, but so be it. I mean, if you think that it's a job that should be done by comfortably by a technical, not even a technical person, but a public servant or something. If you think a minister got to leave his job, all right, onerous as it is already, to go down there and to direct the removal of vehicles, derelict and other vehicles, and garbage and so on. Well, I guess. Anyway, he was doing it. And I said to myself, I hope this is the start of a major exercise, okay, of removing all of these derelict and other kinds of vehicles and equipment and so on from public spaces that has effectively been appropriated by private individuals. And no sooner had I said that than last week, Wednesday, I think it was, I'd taken my car to get service in Dorman Street at my favorite place, car care there in Dorman Street. And decided to walk back after I lodged the car. So I was walking from car care in Dorman Street there, walking back to South Rhineville because I didn't do my exercise that morning. I thought I was going to do it by just walking back. And I'm telling you, it was torture trying to walk a pedestrian walking Durban Street, a place I know pretty well, but haven't been around for a long time. The the pavement has literally been taken over in major parts by vehicles, movable and immovable vehicles. At one place, there's a whole truck that has taken over the entire pavement, and it has been there for so long. It is growing grass around the wheels. It's growing grass and weeds and so on around the wheels to tell you how long that truck has been there. And so at that particular point, you got to come off whatever little pavement you're able to get to walk on to go in the middle of the road, as I had to do. Scary at that hour in the morning, because you know Dublin Street is always busy. Scary trying to walk around the truck to get back to whatever little pavement that is left. And so I know they listen to this program, and I'm calling on Mr. Ejil to take a look at Durban Street, an extremely busy street, and a street that has several schools, to see that the pavement has been literally appropriated by private individuals. Parking in Durban Street is a problem. So what people do is that they ride the pavement. They park on the pavement. And so the pedestrians that are supposed to be using this pavement, they don't have access to it anymore. And it gets worse around that part where that Betancourt um, food place is. That there is a no-no. So, Mr. Ejel, if you're listening, or if you have people who are listening, go there this morning, especially it rained this morning and puddles of water would be on that road. Go there and see the kind of chaos that has been created. by so many people parking their vehicles on the pavement, some permanently and some temporary, but the temporary seems to be going into permanent. Then, of course, you have to deal with things like sand, builders' waste. Then you have to deal with when it floods on Durban Street, all the debris gets backed up onto the pavement. So you literally don't have a pavement to walk on. And of course, I'm talking about Durban Street, and I'm almost sure people are going to be calling in and talking about other areas where having a pavement is of no use anymore. Is of no use anymore. You know, uh, from Buxtonian Road to Hill Street going east on Durban Street. There's a pavement there too. And again, I don't see many people using that pavement. The grass is always growing over the pavement. The pavement is taken over by vehicles or debris or garbage or so on. So I hope this is the start of a exercise, a major exercise, um, and that it will continue, and that Mr. Edgel will send his people every day to inspect the very place that he has just cleaned to make certain that people aren't back to their old ways. Because it's the same Mr. Edgel who on that live said he was calling somebody to come and remove the vehicle, and they told him plainly they're not moving it. They told him plainly they're not moving it. That is the level of indiscipline we have in the society. And just like the problem that we have today, and so many of the other problems, we don't subscribe to the broken glass theory. You know, when it's small, you repair it, because if you leave it, then you know what is going to be the problem soon thereafter. And that's what we do. One small little person knocks up a little shack by the roadside to sell two bananas and some mangoes. You say, oh, the person making a living. Next thing you know, they got a whole permanent structure down there. It gets wider, it's obstructing traffic and everything else. And by the time you're ready to um, move them now, because since you didn't move the first one, then more begin to join. By the time you're ready to move them, it's a societal crisis you have created. So these things you're going to have to nip in the bud. And once you move them, you have to make certain that it's permanent and that they don't go back, and damage the place and so on. So I'm calling on you, Mr. Edgel, to take a look at Durban Street in particular. The pavement there is gone. Too many cars and trucks and everything else are parked on the pavement in Durban Street. All right. The second issue I want to, and this one here has borne me up um, from the time I read it. In Starbuck News of 19th January, in a letter to the editor by Eric Phillips, entitled 400th Anniversary of Africans Here Has Been Ignored. Eric Phillips, who happens to be the chairman of the Guyana Reparations Committee and the vice chairman of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and someone who I know very well and who I have a high regard for, was moved to write that this year, 2026, marks the 400th anniversary of the arrival of Africans in Guyana. Let me say that again. This year, 2026, marks the 400th anniversary of the arrival of Africans in Guyana. If he didn't say that, if he didn't make that known, how many people in Guyana could say that they knew that? How many Africans in Guyana could say that they knew that? And how many Africans could say, if even if they knew it, what significance it was to them? But why he was moved to write this letter is because he was bemoaning the absence of interest by the government in this historical fact and the lack of celebrations of such an important milestone. He was bemoaning that fact. He reminded us in that letter that Africans cleared with their bare hands and knuckles and fingernails 15,000 square miles of swampland, and in the process lost 473,000 souls. 473,000 souls they lost. That was more people than remained at the time when we got our quote unquote freedom, our eventual freedom from the imposed slavery. He reminded us that Africans who were brought to this land we now know as Guyana. They were brought to this land 212 years before Indians arrived from Inyo. 208 years before Portuguese arrived from Madeira. And 227 years before Chinese were brought from mainland China. You recall that indentureship, which apparently ranks above slavery in this new dispensation, lasted for 70 years. Sorry, lasted for 83 years, 1834 to 1917. Lasted for 83 years. During that time, Indians, by the time Indian indentureship came to an end, the Indian population had overwhelmed the African population that they came and met. By the time Indian immigration ended in 1917, they had brought so many Indians to Guyana as to overwhelm the African population that they came and met. So when Jagon said he got the numbers, he was right. At one time, Indians represented 50-something% of Guyana's population. Africans who came 212 years before Indians arrived in this country. The strict African population had declined to lower 30s. So African population made up a mere 30 something, low 30 something% of the entire Guyana population, with Indians at that time exceeding 50%. How are you going to win any elections under those circumstances? at that time. How? Eric Phillips also reminded us that Africans came to this country 100 years before the Mukushis, Wapishans, and Erikunas, three of the 9 tribes of Amerindians we talk about in this country. And Africans came 200 years before the Waiwais, another of the 9 Indian tribes in this country. But Amerindians get grouped as one, notwithstanding their 9 tribes. So even though these 4 tribes came long after Africans arrived in this Guyana, they are treated as Amerindians who belong to the land, and get the special treatment, including allocations of significant parts of the country as a block, of people, allocated significant parts of the territory of Guyana. In his letter, Phillips bemoaned the egregious and strange silence about celebrating and reflecting on such an important event. And he bemoaned the increasing marginalization of African commemorations, citing a 40-page insert in the Guyana Chronicle for the Indian Arrival Day last year, but nothing similar for emancipation. Nothing similar for emancipation. He noted the rebranding of Guyana away from its national motto of one people, one nation, one destiny, to one Guyana, including this nonsense one Guyana being prominent in, of all documents, our national passport. And he concluded with a quote from Marcus Garvey. The quote was, "A people without the knowledge of their past, a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." Is like a tree without roots. And I would like to recognize and acknowledge another apt Marcus Garvey quote, in which he said, "If we as a people realize the greatness from which we came, we will be less likely to disrespect ourselves." Let me go that over again. If we as a people realize the greatness from which we came, we will be less likely to disrespect ourselves. And that is what we have really been doing. That is what we have really been doing. We as African people have been disrespecting ourselves, have been feeling sorry for ourselves, have been lost, have been rudderless, have been running helter-skelter, have been looking to everybody else except ourselves for guidance. And so today, you have a scenario where the wealth of this country, for which your ancestors slaved under the most inhuman of conditions history has ever known and the world has ever known, today we have become the meal rather than being the menu. We have become the meal rather than the menu. We are satisfied with the chaos that exists today. I say satisfied because in my book, there has been no serious effort, even after the disastrous outcome of the 2025 elections, there has been no serious effort. No serious effort. I'm not saying there hasn't been an effort. I'm saying there has been no serious effort at stemming the loss that is taking place and of coming together, uniting to move forward. Instead, the race is for the march backwards into subjugation. And that is what you're seeing. Everybody happy and comfortable in their small numbers. Everybody is happy to moan and complain. Everybody is happy and to sit and write their letter or to write their commentary on social media and think that they have done their job. Everybody is happy to let the world know that we can't go forward because today is a money people and we ain't got money. When I hear these things, when I hear these things, I said to myself, how could we be where we are today if the moaning and groaning that you're hearing today was the stance accepted by our foreparents? How could we? And aren't we doing them a disservice when those people, notwithstanding their inhuman conditions, always sought ways of earning their freedom or taking their freedom or something, while we stand now moaning and groaning, bemoaning that a government, a people who came here 400 years, is begging for recognition. Begging for recognition. That is what we are doing, begging for recognition instead of demanding inclusion. We're begging for recognition. Eric Phillips writes letter bemoaning the government's lack of interest in 400 years. You think this government is going to be interested in celebrating 400 years of Africans being in Guyana? You think that will be, you think there will be? You got to do more than bemoan. You got to do more than that. More than that. I don't know why because this is the same Eric Phillips who I saw dancing on a stage in the yard of State House with the president and everybody else who was on stage. You're telling me you're not leveraging that contact with the president to make certain that the appropriate celebration is done for the 400th anniversary, and that we knew the 400th anniversary was going to be in 2026, like how the 60th anniversary of independence is this year, and they started activities towards the 60th anniversary of independence since last year. And they're going to be having a whole year of 60th anniversary independence this year. Why? Because Jagan was associated with independence, and they want to rewrite history, revisionist history, by thinking that he's some father of independence. You're telling me such an important event to the calendar of Africans in this country is going to be a footnote in history of 2026? Where are all the other African organizations? You're sorry for me. I behaving this bad, man. It really hurt me as an African. Hurt. That our foreparents could have come here and dug this country and made this country what it is today. And we have to feel like if we begging lodging in this country. That's what has happened. And that is what our people believe that they are comfortable with. Every day you wake up the papers, you feel that there's no hope for the African in this country. While they're struggling to show you, they're giving some check, some cash grant check, finally to some fisher folk, some African Guyanese fisher folk or some African Guyanese farmer, and telling yourself, you see what we're doing for them. Name me one hotel in this country that has opened since 2021 that has been opened by an African person or African conglomerate. Name me one. They run out and they give the CISPRO sisters. Where are they today in terms of the oil black? Where are they? Name me one single business entity in this country of African origin in trading, in wholesaling, in retailing, in anything. Don't point to me to some little small business that get $2 million or $3 million, whereas you got multi-billion dollars given out. One man is so rich, he can take a chance on building a refinery in Guyana. A refinery that has a capacity of 100,000 to 120,000 tons. But Gaisuko producing last year 59,000 tons and the year before 40,000. So where will he be getting the sugar to break even in this factory? But he's so rich, he can get involved in such a risky venture, even when the input is not secured. Where are our Azwadins? Where are our black Azwadins in Guyana? None. None. So before I got into the budgeting, yeah, because I've been around budget for a long time, and sometimes that itself, you know, doesn't necessarily put me in a good mood. But this here is so fundamental to our continued existence as a race in this country. It's so fundamental. Note in the last census, the preliminary results, they were careful not to tell us what is the percentage of the various composition of the races in this country. They were careful. I will surprise if our percentage has not been further diluted in that so-called 900 and something thousand people. But if we continue to bemoan and complain and write letter and we thought that we done with job, we done with job. If a high profile person like Eric Phillips, who is the chairman of the Guyana Reparations Commission, the vice chairman of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, if such a high profile person with access to the president can't get the government from since January 1, 2026 broke to have a banner running in the national newspapers or on the national NCN, at a minimum, reminding that this year is the 400th anniversary of Africans' arrival. If he is that close, what does it say? What does it say? It says that we as a people can be ignored because we have been picked off, because we choose to go separately rather than come together collectively. Once you choose to go separately, you will be picked off and used and abused. But some of us like that because from slavery of being abused, we know of no other condition. And so, even though the whip is not being applied physically, we are unaware that the whip is being applied mentally. But we can't tell the difference. We can't tell the difference. And it will continue. The exclusion will continue. And I'm talking here exclusion as a group. I'm not talking, a couple of names. They tell you I got seven, oh, we got 7 African Guyanese in the cabinet. What does that mean to the average person, average African Guyanese? Are these role models for the average African Guyanese? You know, the average African Guyanese can see role models that don't look like him or her. But as they say, carry on smartly. Carry on smartly. If we don't, if and I and look, at one time there were about 200 or something or 300, or in fact, when you have emancipation coming up, and we were giving out assistance to hold different emancipation events, you'll suddenly see there are about 200, 300, 400 different African groups in Guyana who will just come up and then disappear. But what about the key groups like Ipadaji and ACDO? What about those key groups? What about the trade union movement under Lincoln Lewis? Yes, I know Lincoln Lewis is now aged and so on, but he still remains the general secretary. And what about the president of the TUC? I'm not going to call Fitok because, why waste time? But what? They're not aware also that this year marks the 400th anniversary of Africans' arrival in this country. They're not aware. No one wants to talk about it. It's not on Facebook. It's not going to be in the national media. It's not on the non-national media. Nobody cares. Is anybody listening? America is celebrating her 250th anniversary of independence, and they have massive activities planned all over America for the whole year and so on. An event like the 400th anniversary is going to pass us by, not on the calendar. It's going to pass us by. But like I said, carry on smartly. If this doesn't hurt you as an African to the core, that you are begging for recognition in a land that your foreparents built, in a land that your foreparents humanized. For without them, there would be no British Guyana and consequently no Guyana. But there's this race to wipe our contributions out of Guyana, aided and abetted by people who look like us. Aided and abetted by people who look like us. I was reading yesterday Conversation 3 by Ralph Ramkaran. And of all the things that has happened in this world and are happening in this world, he chose to comment on a book by Professor Lewis, written since 2024 on Bornum. On Bornum. All them things that going on in this world now. But he chose January 2026 to comment on a book by Professor Lewis on Bornum. I'm not going to tell you how we say. You're going to read it. It's in Starbuck News, yesterday's Starbuck News. Or on his column conversation tree. And I wrote on a chat line, I said, is there anybody in the PNC who is going to come out and counter this narrative? And I bet my $2 bill, my blue $2 bill, that I might be waiting Christmas and still, because it is this disinterest, it is the failure of the PNC comrades to have the same zest and zeal as those who try to humanize Teddy. It's their failure. And so those who hate Bornum to the core, it is their narrative that keeps rising to the top. Bornum, of course, is the one who started it. Because with all his brilliance, he never wrote nor did he have somebody writing his story, his story. So other people are writing his story without getting it from the horse's mouth. They're writing his story according to their interpretation. And because of that, you get what you have today. You don't get the sanitization of Teddy Jargon that you got in so many books written by Indian scholars, sanitizing and excusing Teddy Jargon's behavior. You don't get that with Bornum. You get Bornum in the raw, how they think Bornum. Every now and then they may throw a bone. Oh yes, he was diplomatic and he was state, he was a this and that, but he was a this. As you would see in Ram Quran's column when you read. Oh yes, he did acknowledge Bornum this and Bornum was a that and so on. But the rest, the whole column, minus those little pieces, was their understanding or their feeling or their view about Bornum. Anyway, man, today is budget day. And then a lot of people say, so what? A lot of people say, what does it mean? And when people have to come to the situation, to the condition or the situation where they have to say, so what, or what does budget day mean, right? You could you could understand how far we have come. You know, I always remember growing up that my first interest in budgeting was shaped by my father taking me down to Parliament Building, walking from Station Street to Parliament Building very early to listen to budget being read in the House of the National Assembly. Because it was a big thing in those days. People would assemble to listen to it. Today, people no longer assemble. And it's been made worse for the listeners. Because now it's a race to break the record of delivery from the previous year. I think the record is now being held by Ashley for last year's delivery. And God forbid, I think he's going to break the record today. And at that stage, people tune out. They don't listen anymore. The ones who listen are the ones who are forced to listen. You just got to look at the broadcast to see how reckless, or not reckless, restless their own people in the house become after a certain time. People sleeping, people playing on the phone, people fiddling, people getting up to go and take a bathroom break or a smoke break or a coffee break. It's too long. It's too long. It's torture. It's no longer budget. It's torture. I'm a budget, consider myself a budget person, but I'm not prepared to listen to those hours. Not at my age. I need frequent bathroom breaks. Torture. No budget should be that thing. So my first recommendation on this budget day is that consideration be given, not by standing orders or any such, but by the government, and in particular the reader, to restrict the activity of presenting the budget to no more than 3 hours, maximum. Maximum 3 hours. And as a result of that restriction, imposed, self-imposed restriction, you shape the budget speech in a manner that it will reflect the important aspects of the performance of the economy for the previous year, and it will dwell on the important aspects of the projections for the current year. The monotonous and labored details can be left to the presentations by the individual ministers and MPs during the budget debate. And it's about time that the time, and this is about debate on the speech, it is about time that the budget calendar, that whole budget presentation, passing estimates, it's about time that process be lengthened, because we're no longer talking about a budget of 100 and something million. We're talking about a budget of thousands of millions of dollars, thousands of billions of dollars now, because we're talking about it now of $1 trillion budget. So $1 trillion got 12 knots, $1 billion got 9 knots, and $1 million got 6 knots. So we are talking here of a budget that is thousands of billions of dollars, not $100 million anymore. So you can't allow 5 days for debate on the speech and another 3.5 days or 4 days for consideration of the estimates of $1 trillion+. So that's the first thing that has to change. The duration of the speech and the content of the speech. Those two have to change. And then, of course, the calendar. So I would say 2 weeks for debate on the speech. That will give particularly the opposition more time. This business about equal time. And let me talk a little bit more on that. During the debate on the speech, I think each MP who is not a shadow if I recall, is allowed 15 minutes plus 5 to wrap up, so that 20 minutes. If you are a shadow, if you are a minister or a shadow, I think you're allowed 30 minutes plus 5. And it coming, girl, my memory a bit hazy, and you're more recent on this. If you are a minister, you are a shadow to the minister, you are allowed 30 plus 5, 30 minutes plus 5. You don't realize how time flies when until you start speaking. And then you start getting sidetracked. And then you start getting heckled. All of that, your time is going. And with the speaker that you have, he ain't about to give you back any particular time. Unless it's time that he intervened, he will give you that back. But he ain't giving you back all them time when you got to, when you getting heckled all over and you can't get through and them, get through your thing and so on. 30 plus 5. And like I said, and the leader of the opposition is allowed at least an hour. Usually, Barton Scotland allowed Jagdeo to drone on and on and on for over 3 hours. He didn't limit his time. I don't know that Manzu is so generous, because I remember watching when Arbery was opposition leader, and I remember him limiting Arbery. But Barton Scotland allowed Jagdeo to go on and on and on and on and on all the time without cutting him. He reasoned that as the leader of the opposition, he had to be given as much time as possible to put the opposition side. I guess there's some merit to what Barton had in mind, and but still, you can't overdo it. You can't over 2.5, 3 hours, you know. Because like I said, when you stand up there, and if you're a good talker, like me, you can go for about 6, 7 hours. So you got to get some limit. And of course, the person who presented the budget is given unlimited time to rebut and wrap up. Budget can't be seen as a, some perfunctory exercise, especially when you're talking about $1 trillion. And so to tell an MP that he or she is limited to 15 plus 5, 20 minutes to present their case, 20 minutes? So that whole thing has to be looked at all over again. Now, we talk about shadow just now. And the only people to have named their shadow is APNU. Normally, when the opposition is monolithic, one opposition like you had in the 12th Parliament, those shadows obviously come from that one party. Now you have a problem. So, Win Party, which is the official opposition that produces the official opposition leader, they're also now the party that will name shadows. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately because I got 3 parties in Parliament. Unfortunately, their shadows will be the recognized shadows shadowing the government. And Terence Campbell's shadows will be shadowing their shadow. If you see what I mean. So if Miss X from Win shadowing Miss Brown, the Amerindian minister, she will get 30 plus 5 minutes to respond. As Ms. Brown will get 30 plus 5 minutes in our presentation. But Ms. Finance, who is shadowing Amerindian for the APNU, will only get 15 plus 5 minutes because even though she's a shadow, she's not the official shadow in Parliament. She's shadowing the shadow. Now, that is a problem now because the Win Party seems to or has given the impression of not wanting to work with the APNU. I don't know. People have put in their ears that if you work with the APNU, you're going to go down the road of the AFC. I've heard that. I've heard that from a Win source. That if they're seen working with the APNU, they may end up like the AFC. But I didn't have to hear that from the Win source. It's in Azruddin's every every thing that he says or doesn't say. There is no rapprochement in whatever he does in his relations with APNU. If you go back to the alleged WhatsApp message that he allegedly released, in which it is claimed, in which it is said in that message, Chief, you remember how Stacia and the coalition government strangled me and the old man, or treated me and the old man during their time in government. And he was talking here about taxes and so on, levying and so on. So together with his troubles, Azudin has a dislike for an inbuilt dislike for the APNU because of his alleged treatment while the APNU coalition was in government. And that seems to have guided his approaches or non-approaches to the APNU. Y'all got to call a spade a spade. Y'all running all around the place and trying not to call a spade a spade. Call a spade a spade. I know y'all made several attempts to engage, but by now you realize they don't want to engage. And it's up to y'all to devise your strategy of how you can deal with that. Because already, combined, the opposition is at a huge disadvantage. You are 7 seats adrift of the PPP. Even if you were 1 seat adrift, it has shown already that you'd have had a huge problem trying to convince the government. But at least life would have been a bit easier. But when you're 7 seats adrift, you have to come up with a different strategy. And if you're not going to unite around a common strategy, then you better start from now, not wasting your time trying to go after something that is going to be illusory. You better seek to pour whatever energy you got into a direction that will bring greater results than what you are. I'm not saying you got to unite, but I'm saying, listen, face up to reality. Face up to reality. Win wasn't born out of any love for politics or any love for people. As you well know, Win was born out of a circumstance. And the leader of Win is making it well known that my interests come first. The people is afterwards. We love to put the people in front You know, it's about the people and the people and the people and the people. There will be no win had Mr. Azadin not find himself in the circumstance that he is in. So Win wasn't born out of a cherry dragon type desire to help poverty and poor people. Win was born out of a selfish desire, and it is being pushed to the maximum. If along the way poverty and all these different issues can be attached, all the better. But IPNU and FGM and them and the parties who are out of parliament, AFC and ALP and VPAC, y'all don't fool yourself. Y'all got a real fight on your hands to stay relevant. So that is as much as the shadows go. So of course on budget day, you expect the usual. Minister comes with his briefcase filled with his government's policies and plans and so on. And on that day, the business of the House is suspended to allow the reading of the budget uninterrupted. And as you know, usually on that day, nothing much else takes place. Perhaps all year before they meet, the whips may meet. The whips may meet with the speaker to determine time allocations, meeting times, how long the sessions will go for. Normally sessions will go up to 10 o'clock, with, um, let me see, I think 2 or 3 breaks. But since we're starting in, since we are starting 2 o'clock, yes, I think you have tea and dinner, right? Something like that, or dinner and then something afterwards. So maybe 2 breaks, okay, 10 o'clock or thereabout, so that that particular day's business is finished. So there's a committee that does with that, a parliamentary committee, standing committee on something, right? I know Gail Teixeira and Amna Ali, the 2 whips used to meet and iron out those issues. So now maybe that will get ironed out or just prior before the session starts and so on. So I figured maybe that might happen this time around also. But importantly, you have a 10 o'clock meeting this morning for, of all things, the election of the leader of opposition, the leader of the opposition. An event, nondescript, an event nobody cared about. It will happen, but only on this time around. The speaker and the government conspired into making it an international event. An event where the international, the regional, and local people have so much interest. If we had the kind of flights and so on, I'm sure international people will be flying down here, but they have their correspondents here who will be feeding them. Can you imagine? The simplest of tasks of electing a leader of the opposition as defined in Article 184, of the Constitution, has now been made into an international event. Why? Because of the machinations of the government and its speaker that is appointed by the government. Mr. James Bond, so much for your so-called 3 separate branches. These branches might be separate, but some of them aren't apart. And the branches might be separate, but we could talk about how much we want about what the literature and so on says about equal. These branches aren't equal. Some are more equal than others. This is Orwellian. And unlike the American that Mr. Nadir didn't seem to understand or never studied, asking where their opposition leader. How disgraceful. Imagine that whole thing gone to the whole international community. How much more can we disgrace ourselves? Haven't we disgraced ourselves already with Jim Jones and 4.2 tons of cocaine and all these kinds of things? We got to disgrace ourselves by asking America where's their opposition leader? America got minority leader and majority leader. The majority leader usually comes from the 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 the, 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 the ruling or the party with the greatest numbers. The minority, of course, says that. And here is a little tickler that you may forget or don't know. All the time, our constitution had leader of the opposition. The 1966 constitution talked about leader of the opposition. But in order to humiliate Cherry Jagon, the 1980 constitution changed leader of opposition to the minority leader. So Cherry Jagon, the leader of the opposition, then became the minority leader, a title borrowed, of course, from the United States, minority leader. The rest of the Caribbean, of course, had leader of the opposition and retained leader of the opposition, as per the British style. But guess what? After the PNC lost the election in 1992, Hyde became the minority leader. And he loathed that title of minority leader because it made him feel inferior. He loathed the title. So by the time the constitutional amendments came around in 2000, he was insistent that that thing revert to leader of opposition. As in Paris now dead, otherwise he would tell you. How it loathed minority leader. And so it's the 2000 amendments that reverted the title to leader of the opposition. Yeah, so it's simple. Article and this is and Kodaki, sometimes you yourself are your worst enemy. You will recall that is on this program here a few weeks ago, long before anybody talked about it, that I talked about all of these different things about appointment of the opposition, and you know, giving you scenarios that perhaps 4 people can be poached from win, and and that other person become leader of the opposition and so on. You remember I gave scenarios, but I said it wouldn't be for long lasting, because there's an article there that says, and then I gave a whole thing about the recall legislation. All of these things, they don't reference the program nor me. They bring it now as if they're suddenly they're the exports on it. I'm not the export. All I'm saying is that I claiming, and this program should claim, that we force brought those things to the attention of the public. I think it was in September. Yes, I think it's around September. When we force on this program here brought those matters to the attention of the public. It's September, I think, or it's October. But we did it here. We did all of that here. And the recall legislation and so on. People are thinking that there may be surprises and so on. Listen, in life there will always be surprises, but I don't see much of a surprise this morning. I don't see much of a surprise. They will meet, and they will do the nomination, and by a show of hands, because that is what the Constitution said, by a show of hands, those in favor, they show the hands, the count, good, we got the number, that it will be reported to the assembly, and then it will be reported to to the president, and the president's appointee lead the opposition. I don't know, given given the given the walkout act, yet again a most unfriendly act. If you knew that there was a high possibility of Ajuddin going to the farewell, why didn't you excuse yourself by not going, send Todd, or send Robert Prasad? And in the way, and in that way, nobody from the legislation nor the executive would have been involved. Send Robert Prasad, he's the foreign secretary. And I told you how the foreign secretary story came up too. And let him go. Everybody else will be busy with budget. And Miss Jane Miller, as understanding as she be, a very gracious woman and so on, she would have understood. But you're all torn up. You're all torn up. The man walks in and y'all embarrass the lady by walking out. And she just remained the same British stoic person, stiff upper lip British. Yeah, walk out, good. This is my reception, it will continue. Who you think felt like a sentice? The lady? No, it's y'all who look foolish. Because, like I said, you could have sent Robert Prasad, and everybody else will say, listen, be busy with the budget and think, sorry. But she will have to pay her courtesy calls as she finally leaves, and you make up. It won't break the relationship that Guyana got with Britain and so on. But no, you go on there. You first do it to the Americans in 2014 with Brent Hart. Now you do it to Jane Miller. Go bravely, man. So you still got to sign and still got to recognize him if he's elected today and treat with him as leader of the opposition. I want to tell Mr. Ajuddin something. If you get elected today as leader of the opposition, you need to humble yourself. You're giving off vibes that is going to rub the other members the wrong way. The thing is, before you can make a decision as leader of the opposition, now that you got three parties in the parliament, you got to consult with the APNU and the FGM. And indeed, in some cases, you got to consult with the wider Guyana before you come to a decision. It's not just you think you could sit down in a dark corner with your people and, for example, nominate people to the Teaching Service Commission without getting the concurrence of the APNU and FGM. It's yours ultimately to make, but you can't do that decision without consulting the rest of the opposition and trying to get their agreement on your candidates. And as part of the leadership, you will indulge them by asking if they have candidates also that they wish to recommend for your consideration. This is not upmanship. The days of that done. You know, in Parliament, is you got to think about the greater good. And you can't go antagonizing the rest of the opposition in Parliament or the ones outside of Parliament. So you may not want to unite with the APN. I don't think they want to unite with you either. But uniting we're talking about is coming together to make certain that we pursue agendas that are similar for the greater good rather than wasting resources. You don't have all the answers. APNU don't have all the answers. FGM don't have all the answers. But together, we could narrow the differences. I think last week, Saturday, I saw a picture in the papers with the government, Ashni Singh, and the private sector. I was surprised because ordinarily they would have seen the individual organizations in the private sector. But I guess it's a good idea to bring all of them as one because generally they come up with more or less the same things. And in many ways you could anticipate. You could anticipate what they're gonna come with anyhow. I used to go through their previous submissions and write down certain key things. And I was never wrong, never. Because it's the difficulty I always had with the private sector. They feel that, and especially when they dealt with the coalition government, that they had some ransom over the coalition government, or uh, or- and it reflected in the disrespect in the 2017. I think it was the 2017, the disrespect in the coalition and so on. But how could you be dealing with captains of industry when you ask them, you said to them, okay, you want VAT removed from that item or VAT removed from those equipment? Give me a paper, a study or paper or something. Show me how you reach the conclusion that moving VAT from that equipment will improve production and will earn us, the government, something as it earn you something. They don't produce a paper, but they go out there if they don't get it and say the government is anti-private sector. And the private sector must come out and say, over the last 5 years with this government, what study did the private sector has done and presented to the government to convince the government to remove concessions or to vary something or to implement X policy or Y policy. Produce the study. Not one. But every year they will turn up with the same basket of requests. Same basket, adjusted for the ones that they got in the previous year. Same one. And so I saw the picture in the papers. And I said, okay, it's not a bad idea. But wait a minute. This 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 meeting is taking place substantially into the whole budget process. What it is that they could tell the government at that point in time to make the government change what they've already done concluded. What? So I figure that this is just a show, a horse and pony show. A horse and pony show. And then I saw a video with the president of the GCCI. I think she's still the president of GCCI, extolling the virtues of the consultations and so on. And one time we went there and we asked for VAT to be removed on this thing, and we didn't think that it would happen, but there, when we read it was read, they removed the VAT and so on. Well, this is what these things are what they champion. This is what they champion, but they can't tell you. When she asked for the removal of the VAT on that particular thing, what has been the impact? Or what was the intended impact? What was the intended impact? I see even today's papers, my good friend Lowe, Elson Lowe, being interviewed by Kaicho News, asking for lower, I think, VAT and income tax and so on. I don't know whether he's doing that from a standpoint of politician, ex-politician, or a technical and professional person. Because these things depend on what hat you're wearing, depending on what hat you wear. But if I got time, I'll come back to that or don't bother. Just passing. The comment was made in the sense that there are too many requests that are being made, particularly that will result in, that have revenue impacts, that are being made without any study to convince the policymakers that this is an approach that they should take. Rather, they come to you, remove that from so, because it can help the people. And they expect you to do it. You, a policymaker, to do that when you can't convince your cabinet about the impact about it. And they ain't give you any study that you could rely on to convince the cabinet that, look, this is what it's saying. And then, of course, this government, in its heartiness and its know-allness, it feels that it don't need to consult with the opposition. So since it has returned to power in 2020 in August, it has never invited the opposition for consultations and had the temerity, some of them, and their sycophants, of saying, well, the coalition didn't invite the opposition. And I'm happy, my sister Annette, are you here? I'm getting like Lorly Nesto. Are you here? I'm happy that Annette, in her post, debunked such nonsense. I often tell people, and I will say it over and over and over again, as opposition leader, Jagdeo will rank as the most divisive person who ever served in that post. He made no bones very early. Because, first of all, they felt that they were robbed in 2015. People forgetting that they never attended Parliament when Parliament opened again. I think they opened, I think, was it late May or early June or whenever it opened. No, they weren't there. They weren't there. And for several sessions, the PPP were absent in Parliament. Jagdeo, as opposition leader, was only sworn in, I believe, about the fifth session afterwards. He wasn't sworn in the same day Parliament opened because opened because he never turned up. He and his party never turned up. And he always said, he in cooperating, he was there out there, they were thinking GCOM, they were picketing GCOM and all this kind of thing. And he said he not cooperating with this government. Since then, he said the government was illegal. He didn't recognize it. He said he not cooperating with them, except to do with the border. I said it 17 times. That's what he said. So we invited the opposition every year to the budget discussions. They turned up one time. That delegation was led, I think, by Clement Roy. Big delegation in my boardroom, I remember. Clement Roy. And by the time they left and before the ink could dry, everything was in the papers. We didn't even have time to digest it. Everything was in the papers. But they were a pony show. After that, they never turned up. Even though they were invited. They never turned up. Ask the press. They were there waiting outside of my door to see if the opposition will turn up. They never turned up. So when they're going around hollering how they weren't consulted, they were never invited, it is balderdash. And I'm happy that Annette reminded them so. Now it's going to be worse because with 7 seat difference, they don't care anything about the opposition. And therefore, I do not subscribe to Aubrey's position when asked at a press conference by a newspaper. Well, what do you think? He was keeping it close to his chest or something to that effect he was saying. I don't subscribe to that. Or you don't keep it close to your chest after the body done prepare and for the debate. What difference will that make to them? What difference would that make to them? So I have always said from since Harmon was opposition leader, my advice to them is look, they're not going to invite you to these budget sessions. So you invite yourself. Put together a document, send it to them, and at the same time make it public. So even though they did not invite you, at least they will have the benefit of your thoughts, your thinking, and so on. And you will know through their budget and their product that they put out there whether they listened, whether they read, whether they internalized, whether they listened, and even if they came up with a variant of it, you still would have done well. You still would have done well. But you don't do that. And then you complain you weren't invited. Of course you weren't invited, but who cares now? There are many ways, as they say, of attaining the same goal. I had to fight through this foolishness also. When I was minister, I'll ask the ministers for their inputs into the budget. I will rarely get any. And when I go to the highest source, they would send me some of them would send me some of these scraps of things. I would call them, man, where you want all of my things, man. What I'm gonna say when the budget debate come up. That is the attitude I used to get. Man, if I give you everything, I ain't got nothing left for the budget debate. Wait, this is a game? This is a surprise thing? So I see the same attitude coming through when RB says, no, he's not going to be saying no, he's waiting until the budget debate. So what you're going to do with the budget score points? It's not going to get in to the budget. We got to be better than that, smarter than that. Let us put a document out. A document could have been a variant of your manifesto. What would have likely been your first year? Give me a manifesto that you put out. That should have been your document. The first year of your manifesto promises. You put it out there. You put it out there. Short, sharp, snappy. Lots of colors. Lots of charts and so on. And you send it to them. Show them that you could be an alternate government. You're done, but you're not out. But then, my perspective is different. So what can be expected today? Of course, last year represented the $4 trillion budget in the history of the country. And collectively, between August of 2020 and December of last year, the PPP government would have controlled almost $5 trillion in terms of the 6 budgets and supplementary requests made over those years, over those five plus years. Almost $5 trillion budget dollars. Compare that. Compare that to the $1.35 trillion made available to the coalition government for the period May 2015 to August 2nd, 2020. 1.35 trillion. That was all that was made available to us. And we made it count. We made it count. So we had roughly 3.5 times less than what the PPP had in a similar period. But we made those funds count. The problem with financing that nearly $5 trillion is what is of concern to all of us. Because during that period, roughly 8.5 billion US dollars, roughly 8.5 billion US dollars was accumulated in the Natural Resource Fund in that period, 2020 to the end of last year, roughly 8.5 billion almost, that was available to the PPP. Then there had been massive increase in central government revenue, and there had been massive increases also in other revenues, including low carbon credit and so forth. So the question is, where is all this money gone? What did it bring? What did it buy? What has been the outcomes? Those are the hard questions that have to be asked and answered in the budget. And we have to go among behind the rhetoric that will be said in today's. They'll spend, or they will spend, it's amazing. I'm sure they're going to spend more time using out again the coalition that missing since 2020 August. They can spend more time using out. But you have to ask, go behind the numbers, get the statistics. Nearly $5 trillion has bought us a lot, but a lot of it questionable. Like, for example, the roads, the questionable roads. The Linden Highway cost us about 20 million US dollars how many years ago, and stood up to the test of time, almost zero maintenance. The first leg of the Heroes Highway cost us 65 million US. And it took Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, to come here, enjoy the hospitality for the couple hours, and go over the Sonam and cuss we out about the bumpy road. Years ago, they would have called that the slip and fell road, the abortion road. And the government, who extolled the virtues of concrete roads when that road was finished, is now telling us that they always had in mind to asphalt the concrete road. After getting a tongue lashing from Marco Rubio, they put the tail between their legs and tell us that they always had in mind to asphalt that road. So a sixth of it, and we talking here just the leg, the first leg, the leg where they give to all them 20 something different pieces of people, 20 something different companies, or 13, or how many companies they give to. You building highway, imagine you building highway and you're giving highway. One of the contractors of the highway, imagine, is a company more known for garbage than for engineering services. Can you believe it? We can't be real in this country, you know. I'm not saying that maybe they ain't got engineers, but I ain't hiring no company. I ain't hiring no company that is more known for garbage disposal to build no highway. What it says even about the company, if it doesn't want to change its name or or set up a separate engineering company, but instead incorporates an engineering company and a garbage disposal company. You ain't getting hired from me. I don't care how good you be. God, it wouldn't pass the smell test. But there you are, these set of people, none of them ever really, probably some of them never even built a footpath. They're among the people who building a brand new highway out of concrete. And in no time, in addition to the road being poorly built, bumpy and all kinds of things, it started cracking up. They put no weight. None of these roads seem to have any weight on them or so on. All these massive trucks driving and so on this concrete. Suddenly it started to flake and crack up and so on. But now, you will find in budget 2026, you will find in there an allocation for the overlaying of the asphalt road, of the concrete road with asphalt. You call that budgeting? That can't be serious budgeting, man. Can't be. And you build six regional hospitals, and several more are being built. And you have a women and children hospital at Ogle that is still to see the light of day. Schools all over. And look at the caliber of infrastructure. Even as you're building all over the place, the ones that you just built can't even stand up for 6 months. Can't even stand up for 6 months. So yes, the government has spent nearly $5 trillion over the last 5 years. $5 trillion. And what have we? What we left hanging with? Yeah, we get a cash grant. Couple last year, right? Last year we get the cash grant. Yeah, we get a cash grant last year, a national cash grant. Only for the government to tell us now why we don't like cash grant, why we don't think cash grant is the way to go. But you didn't tell us that before the elections. You didn't tell us that before the elections. So while you can expect a cash grant in this year's budget, because they will not go that far as to not include it, as they said they include in this year, I can say to you clearly, it may very well be your last national cash grant. Instead, the government seems to favor, which in ordinary circumstances would have been the better approach, but they seem to favor doling out cash grant to whom they see fit. So if you are a fisherman, and I don't know who's a fisherman, I do not know who's a fisherman. But fishermen suddenly is a category that seemed to be supreme in this country. In 2022, fishermen were favored immediately. There were over 7,000 plus fishermen back in that day, they said, and they got a cash grant. Then last year, out of the blue, no, this year, out of the blue, fishermen were again favored. Their figures have dropped slightly, but they were favored for a cash grant. And of course, if you are a rice farmer, you are favored. So it doesn't matter whether you are inefficient, whether you should have been out of business a long time ago or not. The government is incentivizing your inefficiencies because they will be giving you a, a cash grant in the form of a subsidy for you to continue being inefficient. Under the guise that is food security. I tell you, when you don't got money, you're scratching your head. If we didn't have money, we would have been telling those farmers what they should have been told a long time ago. And we should have been assisting those farmers in the context of where the economy is going to go in a different direction. But no, we got money. We got money. But it's not only that we spending like we heading good. We spending without understanding our future. The debt, which was a mere 1.8 billion US dollars in 2019, and I say mere because I'm comparing it to the number you're going to hear just now, because 1.8 billion US is a lot of money for debt. But this debt that was 1.8 billion in 2019 is estimated to have risen to 7.8 billion by the end of last year, US dollars. US dollars, 7.8 billion. So that's like over fourfold increase in 5 years. In 5 years. And I remember sometime, was it earlier this year or last year, Ashley Singh was on some program telling the woman, oh, the monies in the natural resource fund could pay off the foreign debt and have a little left over. I don't know what was the intent of that statistic or that metric, because at that a particular point in time that he was referencing that, he did not provide any numbers to prove what he was saying. He did not provide any numbers to prove what he was saying. It was just said. The two interviewers drank it up, and that's it. They're not blaming the two interviewers or anything. But if they were smart enough and snappy enough, they should have said something like, how so? What are the numbers? Some kind of thing like that. But they allowed him to say that, make that prose statement without any evidence to substantiate what he was saying. And even if he brought the evidence, it was just a supposition. It wasn't like if tomorrow they were going to draw out the money out of the thing and go pay off the debt. It was just a supposition to quell the growing apprehension over the debt. Because 1 week after you would have said that statement, for example, with additional disbursement or new debt, that statement would have been weakened. Just like how we keep cautioning about new debt, even as oil prices outlook are not favorable, especially with the developments that have taken place in Venezuela. At January the 3rd or so this year, oil prices were down, I think, to about $58 a barrel. Trump, after his escapades in Venezuela, is on record as saying he's trying to bring it down to $50 a barrel. At that rate, Exxon will still be profitable because I think cost of production is for us out there somewhere around 30 something dollars a barrel. And so 50 will still give them a reasonable premium. But it will spell disaster for us. Even as it will spell some good. Let's deal with the good part. The good part, since we continue to import fuels, even though we produce it, when prices go down, then the import costs should be less. Fuel is a major input into almost everything that we do, and it's also a major end user in that uh, fuel. You put fuel in your cars, and and you put them in your generators and so on. And so the theory is ultimately cost of production supposed to go down and prices supposed to go down. Of course, in Guyana, it is rare for prices to go anywhere but up, even when cost of production declines. You know, last week, I think it was after the president berated them, the Aircraft Association suddenly became benevolent and began to lower their prices, not by double digits, a 6% here, a 7% there, and so on. You really honestly feel that these Aircraft Association were being benevolent? Huh? You really? And let me ask you from now, I want you to check the prices of these airfares at the middle of 2026, and see if they're still maintaining the 9% reduction. And if they're not telling you, well, spare parts have gone up, or we still maintain the 9%, but it was 9% adjusted on a higher cost of production. So we still maintain the 9%, but the ultimate price that is being paid by the consumer is higher than January, say, of 2026. But of course, Ali must have felt that he did a great thing in getting these people to lower their price. If you have given them every single concession in the book, because you wanted to show how bad the big bad wolf coalition was, all these taxes. So you take off all, as you claim, taxes that we put on, you take off all. And still you got to berate them to have these reductions in taxes reflected in their final price. He has been berating them for the last 2 years to reduce. Finally, they took a little shame out of the eye and they adjust prices. You see how quickly all of them adjust price? They're a cartel. And I'm telling you, by the time he turn back, them prices gone right back up. It's a show pony, Dagon pony show. Dagon pony show. That is what we get in. And that's what we seem to like. Dagon pony show. So yes, so you got the prices falling, production being ramped up, production being ramped up. So we are producing more oil at a lower price. Now, this may hurt Exxon's bottom line, but Exxon is selling that fuel. Exxon going and park that fuel in some underground bunkers and so on. It is Guyana who got to sell because we don't have any storage capacity. So once they give us our 1 million barrel, we have to sell it right away at the 50 something dollars. Now, 1 year ago, when it was 90 something, look at the premium we were getting. And look at the problem we were getting, trying to get these people to pay a cash grant, given the high cost of living and so on. What do you think will happen when the price falls to 50 or thereabout? When they're ramping up production, what do you think is going to happen in terms of our revenue? And so so we are going to be depleting our reserves, chasing an illusion about paying off Exxon's investment so that we could get a bigger share of the pie. That is what Jack Dio tell we. We front loading so that we could pay catch up down the road. That's people who don't understand how the oil market is work. So we are going to be losing big time. We have no depletion policy. So we can't tell Exxon to ease off on producing because this price is too low. We don't have a depletion policy in place. None. So they are going at breakneck speed, digging out the oil that ain't gonna last any longer than it should have. We're spending out most of the money in the natural resource fund on things that we can't see the results of. Instead of reducing poverty, we ended up today with 58% poverty, 32% in extreme poverty. And yet we're running out there hollering we're the fastest growing country in the world. Aren't we ashamed of these results? This is what you're going to be hearing more and more of today. Plastering the sores. But these cracks are now beginning to become crevices. Crevices. And we are not anymore interested in just cash grant. Cash grant is a bomb. It's a bomb on a festering sore of high cost of living, low productivity, an economy, instead of being diversified, is increasingly being calcified. At the last count, oil revenues are accounting for 87% of the export earnings of this country. 87% of the export earnings of this country. You understand what we're talking about there? You understanding how concentrated we are? You understanding how vulnerable we are? And oil has replaced labor-intensive industries, which might have been a bit less efficient, but where, because they're labor, it means more money was concentrated at the bottom. Oil has come now, and the wealth concentration has shifted, and it's now concentrated at a tiny top. So when you hear the private sector, and I see now Elson Lowe calling for threshold, income tax threshold, these things are not thought out. They're not thought out. And that anybody, I've said this before and I say it again, anybody who keeps moving and tampering with the income tax system the way this country has tampered with the income tax system doesn't know what they're doing, and it also reflects a high inflation situation. You don't be moving your tax threshold every year if inflation is not great. It reflects the high inflation in the country. Because it's only the other day that the minimum wage, I think, crossed 100,000. And yet you asking again for tax threshold increase. Those people at the bottom of 100,000 ain't paying any taxes. The equivalent to the tax threshold. But yet you asking for tax threshold increases. The private sector is asking for tax threshold increases. The minimum wage in the private sector is $60,000. What will a tax threshold increase do to a minimum wage employee in the public or the private sector? What would it do? What would it do? And if I had more time, maybe on Thursday, I'll pick this part back up. To show you how the oil economy, is emasculating or immiserizing the poor people in this country. And you don't even have to go down the road of corruption and them sort of thing. It's a live reality in this country. The 58% poverty is a live reality. What people can expect further in the budget and why they have tuned out, they're expecting to hear more roads, more bridges, more culverts, and all these different things. More of that. There's going to be a long list, tiresome list. And those will be done by that tiny group of friends and favorites and so on, who are going to be the inheritors of the wealth that is being created from the oil. They are the inheritors. I saw stats today reading Sheridan. Good morning, Sheridan. Kudos to you again. Wonderful letter in today's papers. Sheridan reminds us that of the 50,000 house lots that the government set the share out, only 4,000, only 4,000 and something has resulted in complete houses. Complete houses. What a startling statistic. What a startling statistic. But spirit thought, what I would hope that they will do is cut all this nonsense about uh, tax adjustment here and tax adjustment there. Concentrate on people getting a decent salary. Because let me tell you something. When you go to the bank, if you give me a house lot, I strain to pay it, but I give you a house lot. My salary is $200,000. Now that's plenty. Let's say 150,000. North, 150, 160,000. I ain't paying no income tax or little income tax. How much loan you think I could qualify for with 160,000? Eh? You ever ask yourself, government, why a lot of those lots got to remain there? You ever ask yourself why don't matter how much you tamper with the bank interest rate, it don't make a difference to those people because they don't qualify on salary. If you keep moving salary by 5% and 8%, it will take anywhere between uh, 15 to 20 years before they could reach 200,000, by which time that 200,000 is only worth about 60,000 in today's dollars at the rate at which inflation is going. Not the one that you announcing. is the one that is a lived reality. And so if you don't increase the people's salary, they ain't gonna qualify for no loan, and the house lot that you give them will bear busy grass. Or they're gonna sell it back quietly and get a substantial sum of money for it, which is what many of them have done. Sell it back to somebody else where they've got substantial sum of money. And 2 months from now, you see a big building going up in a poor part, small, low income house lot. That's because somebody has sold their thing. Nobody with that kind of money would have been there. But y'all know all of this too. But it makes good thing to go out there and show people drawing lottery and all kind of thing, putting the hand in bag and smiling that they get a number. And when you don't show them having to go and get the donkey cart or the truck to wade through the mud and the grass and thing. And when they reach there, they still can't know which is their plot they own because it hasn't been surveyed. They haven't had markers, nothing. And even when that is done now, how an arch name they're gonna start building on a place that ain't got no drainage, ain't got no light, ain't got no water, ain't got no anything. But that part you ain't gonna show. That part Sherrod and the APN you know got to show. Because that is where the real story is. They will continue to show you those fancy places that don't build, but not the suffering people who got to trek through miles to go and find this lot that they were supposed to get. Now the people who waiting, who don't pay off, and they're still waiting to find or to get the number or get the name call and so on. Anyway, Kidaki, I got lots more to say, but I will leave it for Thursday when we will continue this and look at the budget and see what was produced. All right. So stay well. We started the week. Started with a lot of rain this morning. I get wet up, but the sun looks like it's coming out. All right. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan, for another informative program. I hope that the viewers have received their benefit like I have, and they are going to apply that knowledge as the budget presentation takes place and the debates and so on and so forth. Viewers, thank you for tuning in. I wish you a pleasant rest of the day, and I bid you a safe one. I'll join you tomorrow morning again for another program of Guyanese Morning Time. So do have a great day, do have a safe day, do have a productive day. Stick to those resolutions that you've made and continue to work on those short, medium, and long-term plans that you've made. We will deal with the 400 years of the coming of the Africans to Guyana and the begging of representatives of the African man and woman for recognition. Sometimes I bow my head in shame. But we shall talk about that another day. Y'all have a good day. Much blessings, much love. And like I said, we'll talk tomorrow. Bye bye. Thank you for tuning in and have a good one. Share the live, share the program so others can benefit from it, even though they weren't on live. Share it to your varying platforms and contacts and so on. Goodbye.